InObscuria!
Welcome back, my friends, to the InObscuria podcast, a podcast where we exhume obscure rock and punk and metal, and we put them in one of three categories: the lost, the forgotten, or the should-have-beens. My name is Kevin Williams, and I'm joined today by the one, the only, the man across from me, Mr. Robert Harrison.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Kind sir.
How are you?
Doing fine. Did you get a chance to spend any time whatsoever outdoors today?
I walked out to get the mail. Does that count?
Briefly. Kind of. You got to work on that, man. It was 68 degrees today.
I know. I had the windows open, though.
Oh, okay. That's good. I mean, you do have a car with the top goes down on it and stuff like that, you know?
I don't even get in that car anymore because I work from home.
Oh, that's right. You have nowhere to go in your nice car with the top that goes down. Nice. So all of you listening north of here that, have snow on the ground. And
a lot of snow.
Scraping ice off your car. It was 68 degrees today.
In Atlanta.
And that's the only reason I can live this far north. This Florida man does not do cold weather, and I can live here because we get breaks in the winter weather like this. Every few weeks we'll get a 50 to 60 degree day, and I'm like, oh, okay, God, I made it that far. So we've got like another 4 weeks of hell, and then it starts warming up.
According to the gerbil,
or
whatever it is,
giant gerbil said we got another 4 or 5 weeks, and then we're done with this year's crap.
Oh well, what are you gonna do?
You're gonna put on some clothes and just not go around in your skivvies, because that's what you're gonna do. It's gonna be cold. We're gonna get ice. We're gonna get our ass kicked next week, Tuesday. Forecast says we're getting ice, so get ready for mayhem. People here can't drive if there's rain, so there's gonna be ice on the roads on Tuesday.
We should explain this to people who get a lot of snow, because when we get snow and ice here, it is the funniest thing. People that live in the South understand. It's crazy. If there is even just a slight chance that there will be a dusting, literally that day, all of the grocery stores will be devoid of milk and bread and eggs.
Sometimes beer.
And beer. Yes.
But mostly milk. It's called
milk and bread.
The French toast panic. I don't know why everybody goes and gets ingredients for French toast when it's about to snow.
And we're actually not exaggerating at all. Every single grocery store will be emptied.
Yes.
Even if it's just going to be half an inch of snow.
Yeah, if that. And we know it's going to melt within a day or two. And so, we have this panic buying every single time, and everything shuts down. I mean, obviously, we don't have the infrastructure to clean the roads, but, I get excited about it. Once again, being from Florida and not seeing snow a lot, I get excited about it, but I know this is going to be over in a day or two. So, it's quite comical to watch people just go batshit crazy.
They go crazy.
Some flurries.
Over nothing. And people that are here from the north or, from out west where there's a whole lot of snow, they just look at us like we're idiots. And we are.
We are.
Pretty much.
Oh, no, we admit it. We totally admit it. But that's why I live here. I fit in just fine.
Now, do you remember a couple of years ago, Snowmageddon?
Yes. And
where were you?
I was here.
You were here.
Yeah.
So I wasn't home. I was actually in Arkansas.
Oh, you weren't even in town.
I was not in town.
Okay, now we have two different things. Snowmageddon was the one where it started to snow in the middle of the day, and they let out schools and work at the same time. So you had just a ridiculous traffic congestion just because the schools and everybody's work let out at the same time. In Atlanta, traffic's bad already. And so you had massive congestion.
Several million people here. So
about 6 million. And so then everybody's stuck in this traffic, and it starts to snow and then ice. And so people are having to leave their cars in the middle of the interstate
and
walk
have no snowplows.
8 miles. No way. And so after that, we'll never have that happen again. You know why? Because I bought snow chains for my truck. And since I bought those, they've been sitting on a shelf, and they'll never, ever be used, because that's just a guarantee that I spent $150 on stupid snow chains. I don't know why. I just felt like I needed, after watching people like I said, leaving their car on the side of the road and getting stranded and hearing the stories of people walking 8 or 9 miles to get home in the snow with their kids, that I was like, you know what, that's not going to happen to me. And so now it'll never snow like that ever again as long as I have the snow chain sitting on a shelf. I think I'm one of 5 people in Atlanta that have snow chains.
And there were so many crazy stories of people who basically just had to desert their car because they sat in traffic and it didn't move for hours upon hours.
Yeah.
And I remember a lady I was working for at the time, she was my boss. She said, yeah, I had to get out of my car because I couldn't go anywhere. And I spent the night in the cab of a big truck with a trucker and a transvestite.
That sounds like a really good movie. I mean, that sounds like somebody could have written that into a screenplay, you would think. One night in a truck.
There were all sorts of stories. Like
people would walk to, like, if there was a store nearby, they would at least get to the store.
Sleep in the CVS.
Yeah, or in the, somebody told me they went to the rice section of the grocery store where there's these huge bags of rice and they use that as a pillow. And yeah,
gross.
I don't know if they sold it after that. But yeah, CVS and places like that. So yeah, it was quite a story I watched it unfold at home. I saw it starting to happen, and I was close to home, and I felt the vehicle I was in, well, it was the band van of all things. I was driving the band van, and it started to slip. And I'm like,
man, you could have put like 20 people in there.
Yeah, but I was like, this thing does not get any traction on a good day. And I went straight home, and I watched it all unfold on social media, and it was crazy. It really was. People were really freaking out, but people were helping each other. In situations like that, the good side of people comes out, and the people that did have vehicles, this was prior to me having a vehicle that would have handled it, but people were helping each other out and giving people rides and helping push cars out of the ditch and things like that.
My wife did not get home until 1 a.m. that night because she had a 4-wheel drive, and she was actually on her way home. She would see people and go, I got to help these people. And she would take them home. And then she'd start to go home again. She'd see more people, and she'd start. So she did not even get home until
your wife
1
has the biggest heart. I totally see her doing that. She probably would have gone even further. She probably would have driven somebody to Chattanooga if that's what it would have taken.
Yeah. Well, after you have to leave your car and sleep with a trucker and a transvestite, go listen to Pod of Thunder, Growing Up Rock, Slamfest Podcast, Decibel Geek, Metal Up Your Podcast, The Dummy Room, Podcast Rock City, Cobras and Fire, History Science Theater, State of Amorica, Rock Strikes 10, Podder Than Hell, Podcast, I Love It Loudcast, Ages of Rock, The Synaptic Empire, and also Monty's Rockcast.
State of Amorica, that was a new one.
State of Amorica is an awesome All Black Crows podcast.
That's
really, really cool.
Yeah?
Yeah, D-Hud. Go listen to D-Hud.
Cool.
He's a cool dude. I met him at the Rock and Pod, the very first one.
I can only imagine who we're going to meet at this one.
Oh, who knows?
Interesting characters.
There'll be at least 2 people there. What are we talking about? We're talking about the Rock and Pod Expo, August 6th through the 8th in Nashville, Tennessee. So book your hotel. We're actually going to be at the Hilton Airport Hotel. That's where the whole Rock and Pod thing takes place. You can book your room there. You don't have to go anywhere. You can enjoy some beverages all weekend and not have to drive. You'll be at the hotel already. So come join us August 6th through the 8th. They're going to have several bands play on the Friday night, the 6th, and then you have the Rock and Pod all day, the 7th, and I think some of the morning of the 8th.
So Bloody Mary's Saturday morning. And then maybe...
Saturday's a fun day there.
Yeah, so we'll start early with some mimosas or Bloody Marys and then kind of work up from there.
Yep. I think, didn't you say last week that Brad said he was going to buy everybody in attendance a drink?
He did. I have it in writing.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Awesome.
Signed, triplicate, notarized.
The Slamfest podcast will be buying everyone drinks.
Yes.
And it's pretty sure that's what he said.
And he said the fancy stuff, not the cheap stuff.
Yeah, top shelf.
Top shelf.
That's how he rolls,
Tippy
man.
top. You have to get a ladder to get to that
Brad.
shelf.
Thanks so much.
Awesome.
Also, come visit us at InObscuria.com. Like us, share us, recommend us. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Hey, leave us a review, why don't you? Apple Podcasts. We need some of those. Good, bad, whatever. We're also on Podchaser. Have you heard of this?
That's a new Podchaser.
Podchaser, yeah. So it's a place where you can go and find out what podcasts are out there, and you can leave reviews, and you can actually just review a single episode, unlike all the other ones where you basically just review the podcast. But you can go in, and if you like a certain episode, Captain Ryan, bring that dude back. You just go and put it in.
Okay, I'm going to go review that and say, bring Captain Ryan back.
Right. Well, we'll get our first
If you see a
review.
Yeah, if you see a review, that's me.
Well, let's get into this week, man. I had a lot of fun last week getting into something that I think was a little bit new for you, the new wave of traditional heavy metal. Hopefully we opened up some people to some bands that they didn't realize were out there.
Yeah, you've teased it before. It didn't have a name. We've played bands that sounded old but were new and young in other episodes. But yeah, the new wave of traditional.
What's old is new again. Yep. So it is that time of year where I have to go down to the crypt and do a little cleaning, Robert.
It was chilly down there this year. This time of year.
It was not too bad. A little drafty down there always a crazy sounds going on. But I put in my AirPods and, I wasn't really paying attention to where I was because I was jamming out to, listening to our own podcast because that's all I really listen to. All the other ones I tell you to go listen to, I don't really listen to them, but I've heard good things.
We're all
them.
You need.
Yeah. So I just listen to my own self. I fast forward through your bits and just listen to my own voice.
I don't blame you. I really don't.
But while I was doing that, while I was cleaning, unfortunately I knocked over my great-great-grandpappy's urn, which is metal.
It's
a big hunk of metal that he's in.
Clunk.
Well, not just clunk. I recorded the sound because it rolled all the way down the crypt, several flights, down to the way bottom.
Yeah, because it's uneven floor. You need to get that looked at.
I did get what we were going to talk about today from that, but you just got to hear the sound it made. It was just wow. Wait till you hear this. What a clatter.
Wow, man. That just rattled and hummed and all kinds of stuff.
It's a long way down.
Long way down. All the steps.
Long way down.
A couple of balconies.
At least 45 seconds of sound going all the way down.
You need an elevator. That place is dangerous.
You could tell how fast it was going, too.
Yeah. I didn't know urns were that well tuned.
Yeah. Who knew? They had a good beat. Had a groove to it.
Really did.
Yeah. It was hitting the stairs just right.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, so that gave me what I needed, the inspiration for today's subject, which is Episode 65, Shredding the Tomb, a resurrection of Guitar Heroes.
Oh, hell yeah.
We're going to talk about
use that.
We're going to talk about the 6-stringers today.
Mm-hmm.
And
screw those 8-stringers.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, well, I don't think we'll hear any 12 strings, but maybe we're talking about guys that are just revered. At the time. Mm-hmm. Some of them get a little bit lost though as you go through the years. But there's always those ones from each decade that are just guitar heroes. I mean, they had a video game not too long ago where they brought back a lot of these guys.
I think it was called.
I think it was even called
Guitar Heroes.
Rock and roll synonymous with guitar.
Yes, it is.
If you're talking about, for me, any music, I can pretty much get into if it has electric guitar.
That is my philosophy. Even some acoustic.
Even acoustic. Yeah. But mostly I need the crunch, a little bit of distortion, even if it's a clean sound, just to have that little bit of electric warmth, if you will, that an acoustic just doesn't have. But rock and roll, synonymous with guitars. You try saying that.
Cinnamonness.
Yes, that. And there have been guitar heroes since day one. So all the way back to before rock and roll was rock and roll. We're talking about the blues greats. You think of Robert Johnson.
Yes.
That guy was, apparently he made a deal with the devil, but who knows? There's Muddy Waters. John Lee Hooker, Elmore James, these guys are just all still to this day considered guitar heroes, and that was a long time ago. The dudes in the 50s, Chuck Berry,
Chet Atkins,
Eddie Cochran, Les Paul,
exactly.
Somebody even gave him his own signature guitar. I don't remember what it's called, but
it had his name on it, so he wouldn't lose it.
Yeah. The 60s, I think that's where it really came to a thing that, there was
distortion
these guitar
was
gods. Added. Yeah, distortion came in. You had the British invasion, which, think about it, you had Clapton, Beck, Page. Oh, wait, those are the Yardbirds.
Yes.
You had all three of those guys in that band.
Which formed about 20 other bands after that.
Pete Townsend, Keith Richards, Santana. Zappa came out in the 60s.
That's true.
And then everything changed when a man named Jimi Hendrix picked up the guitar.
He's like, hang on a second. Let me show you something here.
Yeah. Bam! If I think of a guitar hero, a guitar god that everybody knows, it's Hendrix.
Yeah.
And
most people would say that's where it started. But what you just talked about was the foundation that led up to Hendrix just kicking everything down.
Yep. And then from there out, the 70s, it was all about how do we better or how do we try to best Hendrix. And so you had dudes like Ritchie Blackmore, one of our favorites, David Gilmour, Duane Allman, Tony Iommi, Brian May, Michael Schenker. You had the proggy guys coming in the 70s. I mean, the 70s was just a prolific time for guitar. You had Steve Howe and Steve Hackett, the two Steves. You had Alex Lifeson. And then at the end of the decade, you had another just big moment with this guy named Edward Van Halen, who again said, whatever, try this. And it changed the game for the next decade. And you had the guys chasing in the 80s, and that's when the whole word shred began, was in the 80s, and you had your 80s and 90s, it was Satriani, Vai, guys who are known for playing guitar so well that they don't even need to sing on their albums.
Yeah,
you have instrumental albums.
I'm too busy playing.
Are charting.
Yes.
I don't think people remember this, but yes, Steve Vai and Joe Satriani had hits on the charts and videos on MTV with no singing. It was just shredding guitar.
Was Joe's album Surfing with the Aliens?
Surfing with the Aliens.
Yeah, I remember that now.
That was a big one.
That was right when, that was mid to late 80s.
Like 87.
87, yeah. That's
there,
right when my brain was starting to think of playing guitar. And that's one of the people, him and Eric Clapton at the same time. Eric was still really huge at that point. So all those guitar players were a little more attainable. You had the Eddie Van Halens and the Shredders, which I didn't think I could ever be like them, but the more melodic players got me interested.
You had Randy Rose early in the decade, kind of chasing and making a scene for that whole LA scene. And then you had cats like Yngwie Malmsteen, who just, again, kind of rewrote how you do things
how
on
many
the guitar.
notes you can squeeze into a measure.
You have one of our favorites that we've talked about, George Lynch, who was just tearing it up. And you had your whole extreme metal thing coming in the 80s, which, again, that was really based on how badass you were on the guitar.
And
you couldn't have a thrash band and not have a killer guitarist.
I was going to say right before the thrash, or maybe the same time, the hair metal genre.
Even the hair metal had good guitars.
You had to have a good guitar player that could shred. That was part of it. Every good hair band song had a guitar solo.
Yeah, you may look silly and you may be singing about good times, but when it came time for that lead, that guy better rip.
The Mick Mars and all those guys, they
can.
It was over the top, but still, they really could rip.
I mean, think about Dave Mustaine and Kirk Hammett and, Slash. I mean, Slash kind of changed things again a little bit.
All these guys with one
influence. Name. Yeah, really. And you cannot not mention Stevie Ray Vaughan. I mean, he brought the blues back at a time when there was no blues.
That was such a weird dichotomy from all the hair bands, how popular they were. And then at the same time, you had Stevie Ray Vaughan on the same channel. And people big hits.
Yeah, loved him. He had big hits, and he brought back that whole Texas country, Texas blues sound that really nobody else was doing at that level.
And to think of how far he could have taken that, because blues would have transcended the transition from hair bands to grunge. I think that would have kept his career would have kept going pretty well, but it ended right at the same time that hair band ended.
Yeah, and
helicopter crash.
And talking about bluesy guitars, when you cross into that grunge period, the early '90s, you had Mike McCready and Pearl Jam, who we talked about a few weeks ago. How he sounds a lot like Hendrix. He's got that
really
bluesy,
underrated.
Yeah,
good grunge didn't have their guitar heroes as much as the hair bands did, but the guys that were playing those songs, even though there weren't big guitar solos, they were still amazing guitar players.
Kurt Cobain was no guitar hero, but I would argue that Jerry Cantrell definitely was. He had his own tone, his own sound. You had Kim Thale and Soundgarden, who just made some incredible sounds. And then you had your more extreme guys like Dimebag Darrell in the 90s. You had Dream Theater was big, so John Petrucci, you had all these incredible, mostly metal and heavy guitarists that are just doing things that were beyond lightning speed. But kind of after that, if you're not in metal or you're not like a traditional blueser, the guitars kind of go away as far as a guitar hero goes.
You just stop seeing or hearing guitar solos in songs. It was all about drop D tuning, open chords, just heavy, but the solos were not to be found. There was no personality in the guitar.
And even now, you have some tasty players out there, but it's very reserved now. Yeah. You don't really have, maybe every once in a while in a pop song, like you've got Nuno playing for Rihanna, so, she in concert, she lets them rip it every once in a while. But really, besides Joe Bonamassa, I don't know that there's another guitar hero. He's definitely one.
Yeah.
But he's more blues than he is rock, but he did have some rock stuff. But it's been kind of weird. So I actually looked up the Guitar World magazine readers' top 10 guitarists of all time just to see who they listed. And I just want to run this down. I think we might have already mentioned every single one of these guys. In fact, I'm pretty sure we did. So if you think about mainstream, who do people vote for as the top guitarist of all time rock guitarist? Number 10, Steve Vai. We mentioned him. Number 9, Dimebag Darrell. Number 8, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Number 7, Tony Iommi. Number 6, Jimmy Page. Number 5, Joe Satriani. Number 4, so 4-1, this is where, I think this poll was taken in 2015. So it's not that old, but number 4-1 is interesting. So number 4, Jimi Hendrix at number 4. Number 3, I love it, but I'm just surprised. Number 3 is Alex Lifeson, ahead of Hendrix. Number 2 is Brian May. And number 1, Edward Van Halen.
Okay. agree with number one, because you can totally interchange Eddie Van Halen, Jimi Hendrix, as far as people who have completely rewritten how to play guitar. Both of them did in different ways. Alex Lifeson,
it's got a big catalog. There's a lot of stuff there and a lot of styles, but I love them, but I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I don't know about that, but who are your? So I'm gonna.
I think that a lot of times they'll purposely sandbag a couple of people just to get people to talk about it. So they'll piss people off by putting somebody up at one or two that may not need to be there, and that gets us talking about it.
Well, I was also thinking about what
6 years later,
what was trending then. So I'm pretty sure that's around the time that they got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Rush.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
I'm pretty sure that Queen was more top of mind. Maybe than the movie. They had been.
When did that movie come out?
No, that was only a couple years ago. It
seems like I know. It seems like 20 years ago now because
movies. What are those?
Movies, yeah.
I see those on Netflix every once in a while.
Exactly, yeah. I watch them on my laptop.
But I'm going to give you my personal top 5, which I can just rattle off.
Okay.
And I'll ask you maybe while I'm giving mine, you can think about yours. So my number one, and I say he's my number one because this man's leads actually make me weep. Mm-hmm. Like I really get misty when I just listen to this guy's leads alone. Not even the song. It's his lead playing. And I'm talking about one of your favorites, David Gilmour. Absolutely he just melts. His fingers just melt on the strings. Number 2 for me, Ace Frehley.
Interesting.
I can hum every single lead that Ace Frehley has ever played.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it fantastic.
Which he can't.
Yeah. Maybe not now.
Not now.
Number 3 for me is Brian May.
Yeah.
I think Brian May's just fantastic, which would put my number 4, you could probably guess, Alex Lifeson for me, number 4.
So are we doing our favorite guitar players or who we think
I'm giving you
is the all-time?
I'm just giving you my personal top 5.
Got it.
Of when I hear these guys play,
yeah,
it just does something for me. 5, I had to do a 3-way tie. I just couldn't decide. So my number 5 is Ty Tabor from King's X, Steve Howe from Yes, and Frank Zappa.
Yeah, you pull all the obscure stuff. Of course you do. Of course you do. Mine's going to be
obscure.
Well, obscure is in, if you ask most people, just the average listener, they're not going to name Frank Zappa. Even though he should be. He's talented enough, but that's just not front and center when they think of a guitar gods.
Well,
he is talented and he can shred.
Well, I'll make a case for Frank Zappa because a lot of people can't get past, some of the camp and the humor and just the overt weirdness that is Frank Zappa. And he was so weird. He was that good that was the route he had to go. He was so damn good that his stuff is weird.
Playing 4/4 straight up rock and blues.
He composed jazz. He composed classical music, and he plays just this amazing. I call it squirrely guitar leads because it's just all over the place. Yet at the same time, it sounds right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of wrong and right at the same time. I love it. I would also almost throw Carlos Santana in there for me because his lead playing alone, it's great. It is a little samey. He kind of stays in the same place all the time, but it's just him. It's just his soul coming out on his strings.
Huh.
So what about your...
Well, it's going to be
what about your
almost
guys?
the same. I mean, obviously, David Gilmour is going to be mine if we're talking about my favorite guitar gods out there for the same exact reason that he was the biggest inspiration for me to pick up a guitar because I could pick out the notes, I could learn what he was playing versus the guys that were just shredding. I had no clue how to even start that. So the way he can interpret a few notes and make it into something beautiful and evoke emotion out of about 3 or 4 notes.
But try to bend like he bends.
No,
it's so hard.
Believe me, I've bought his pedals. I've read the tablature, and it's the same thing as Eddie Van Halen. You can learn to play Eruption. You will never, ever, ever sound like Eddie Van Halen playing Eruption because it's all in the fingers. And Gilmour even says that in interviews. He's been asked a couple of times about his sound and how do you get that sound? And he always answers, "It's my fingers." And it's absolutely correct because he's never on that note very long. He's going up to the note and coming back down to the note as he goes along. And if you watch video of him, it's just not fretting a note. It's just, the strings are so elastic when he plays.
I think young guitarists don't understand that at all. It's all about the gear to them. They think it's all about what you're playing, not how you play. Because I would imagine that even though Brian May has played the exact same guitar his entire career, if you gave him a Squier Strat, I bet it would still sound like Brian May.
Yeah, because it is a personality that comes out, and that's why we gravitate to people like this, is they have that musical personality that they're able to impart through 6 strings.
Yep.
So yeah, that's one, obviously. 2 and 3 interchange with Eddie Van Halen and Jimi Hendrix for me. It just flip-flop either way. And I don't know. God,
you could just do a top 3 if you want.
Yeah, that's definitely top 3, and then everybody else comes at a top 4.
What about for
a big tie?
Now, do you have a different?
Because there's blues and there's shredding, so I can't really compare Stevie Ray Vaughan to. I mean, throw in any CC DeVille from Poison.
Is he one of your faves?
No,
I didn't know this.
Just saying, he can shred the guitar when he's relatively sober. Well, I don't know. I've seen him do it when he's just cracked out of his mind too. Yeah. So I respect that.
People give him a lot of shit, but I actually think he's not bad.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I brought him up. It's one of those, the hair bands where it's silly, over the top, goofy, but the guy can play.
He can play.
So but I can't compare him to Stevie Ray Vaughan because it's just, I feel like I'm disrespecting Stevie Ray Vaughan for, including them in the same sentence.
And I'm just thinking from, these guys that the guitar is an extension of who they are, or they sing through their instrument.
Yes.
That's kind of what I'm thinking of, that's what a guitar hero is to me. Mm-hmm. There are lots of guys who can play better than the guys that we've named.
Yeah. When it comes to technicality.
There are people who've studied, they've gone to Berkeley and they have studied music or wherever they go, and they can note for note play everything, mm-hmm. but you know what? It doesn't feel the same.
Well, that's the Randy Rhoads of the world. In fact, there's an article that came up, my Facebook feed, I've curated it now, so all the stupid articles that just appear are all about guitar stuff or...
algorithms, man.
Yeah, the algorithms. Yeah, or blowing stuff up or something like that. So yeah, the article was, and I didn't get a chance to read it, was 7 classically trained rock guitarists that would surprise you or something like that. And I didn't even click on it, but I know Randy Rhoads is one of them. He was classically trained.
I'm going to play one later for you.
Ooh, okay.
Teaser.
But those are the people that could listen to somebody play something, play it back. And there was a recording, and the guy, I can't remember the guy's name now, the guitarist for Quiet Riot, when he was getting guitar lessons from Randy Rhoads.
Carlos?
Oh, God, I wish I could remember his name. But he recorded the lesson, and you could hear Randy Rhoads talking, and they got on the subject of Van Halen. This is late 70s. Mm-hmm. And the guy was like, show me how to play Van Halen. And Randy plays a riff off a Van Halen song. And the guy asked Randy, he's like, oh, how long did that take you to learn it? And Randy was like, oh, I just played what it sounded like. And so he just thought of Van Halen and played something that sounded very close to Eddie Van Halen.
His interpretation.
It was pretty fascinating to hear Randy Rhoads play Eddie Van Halen. But once again, those are the minds that can see the notes and, not have to read music or, improvise there, because they can just make it up as they go on. They're just amazing. So
now I was going to ask you, I don't know what my answer would be, but are there certain guys that rhythmically, not just playing leads, but from a rhythm standpoint, that stand out to you maybe differently than guys that are playing lead? Because there is a difference. There are guys like, to me, when I say rhythm, I automatically think James Hetfield. Mm-hmm. Like, that man has some rhythm. I don't think of him as a lead player. He plays a few.
He does play leads,
but his rhythms are just unreal. His right hand is amazing.
No, I don't. Even though that's basically what I am, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that comes out as a rhythm guitar player. I know you're going to come up with 2 or 3 good examples, but
I was going to say Jimmy Hazel. To me, the man he's just wow,
just steady. And,
yeah, I mean, he can play the hell of a lead too. But.
Yeah, I'm going to get this. Malcolm Young.
Yeah, Malcolm.
Yeah, yep. And he's one of the underrated guitar players because he's one that wrote a lot of those riffs, but he's just not the front man. He's not the wacky crazy guy out front in a schoolboy suit. Yep. So he's
Johnny Ramone.
I mean,
try to play some Ramone. Try to play. What were their sets like? 30 songs
in 10 minutes.
Try to do that.
30 songs in 10 minutes.
All downstrokes, no upstrokes at all. Amazing, unreal. Well, let's get into it because as I was thinking through this, there were so many guys that we just basically named all these guys just off the top of our heads. But there's a whole lot of guys and girls that play guitar that at a point in time, or maybe with a subset of people, they're guitar heroes. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to focus on. There's so many greats. There's so many great players out there that sit outside the mainstream popular shredders. So we're talking about guitarists that have just kind of, their music's been lost. Maybe you just never heard it, or they've been forgotten. They were big in an era.
Peaked quickly and then disappeared.
And then just people forgot about them because they got replaced with the next next thing. And there's some trends here and some of that kind of stuff. And then there's folks that just should have been or should be bigger than they ever were for whatever reason. So all eras, all sorts of subgenres. I mean, we could do a whole show just on a particular genre and just cover the guitarists that are we consider InObscuria material that should be bigger than they are. So I'm going to kind of dig back in my past and think about things that I heard or have some connection to.
Okay.
So you'll probably know some of this stuff. And the first one I thought about, I was going to play a solo song from this particular guitarist I'm going to talk about in a second. And I thought, why do that? Why play from his solo album when that's not what introduced you to him? So I'm going to play you the song that introduced me to him. And I think I've talked about this before. When I was in the 8th grade and I was really getting into punk and metal, and I remember vividly that Peace Sells But Who's Buying by Megadeth had just come out, and I had it on cassette, and I went to a guy that went to my church. His daughter and my sister were really good friends, and I went to his house for some reason. I don't remember why that was. And so her stepdad, he sees that I have a Walkman, with me when I go to their house. I think we were just picking up my sister. And he says, "What are you listening to?" I was like, "I'll tell him. He's not going to know what I'm talking about because I'm 8th grade. I'm way too cool than an adult." And I said, "Oh, it's a new band called Megadeth." He's like, "Oh, is that Peace Sells? Is that the new one?" And this guy's Dave was probably in his 40s at the time. In those days, that didn't happen very often.
No.
Where somebody that age would know your music.
Yeah, in the 80s, 40-years were listening to Glenn Campbell.
Exactly. They were just not in touch. And they were not the overgrown 13-year-olds that we are today.
Yes.
So, because we never let it, our generation never lets anything go.
No.
Back then, they thought they had to grow up and be big boys. But, he was an old hippie. Okay. So I did know that about him. But he had cut his hair. And anyway, so he goes, "Oh, is that the new Megadeth?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "You want to come down to the basement? And I want to show you a couple things."
Smoke a bowl, man? Yeah.
Well, I didn't know where he was going with it. I'm like, okay. And I go down, and this guy's entire basement was like a record store.
And I was going to say, 40-year-olds inviting 13-year-olds to their basement. Yeah. Normally, you're like, no, sir.
I was comfortable with this guy.
If you knew him,
he was a cool guy. I already knew him. But I didn't know how cool he was because I go down to the basement, and it literally looks like a record store. I mean, it's wall-to-wall, big stacks of shelving, like you would see at an old school
you say,
record store.
I want to be you when I grow up.
Yeah, so I'm still aspiring to be that guy. So he showed me, he had the new Megadeth too, and then he's like, "Yeah, I just got it. It's really good." He's like, what else do you like? What are you into? And I'm just my jaw is open. I'm like, certainly these are all Elvis records or something. I'm just still thinking that this guy, no way can he know
Beatles.
What I like. And so I rattle off a couple of things. At the time, I was really into what was then. I didn't have a lot of musical knowledge or history of where the music came from.
I mean, you'd only been around 13 years. I mean,
exactly. All I knew was what was current. And he goes, "I'll tell you what, I'm going to make you a tape. I'll make you a mixtape. I'll bring it to church next week. And you just tell me what."
That's where you go for all your good metal.
I know, right?
Church.
He goes, let me know what you think. And so he brought me this tape the next week, and it had all of these artists on it that I didn't know. Some of them I had heard of. I just assumed I wasn't going to like it. Like, I remember Side 2 opened with a Grand Funk Railroad song. I'm like, Grand Funk Railroad? That sounds old school and something I'm not going to dig. Of course, love the band. Everything that was on this tape is just in my head now. I could probably rattle off the entire thing. But what opened the tape, and it was a guy I never heard of, and I wasn't big at that time on solo artist. I thought it would only be good if it were a band. But this guy's name popped out, and it was Lou Reed. Okay, I'll check it out. And I pop it in, first song, and this amazing intro with these guitar harmonies fills my ears. I'm like, what is this? This is badass. And it's not a short song, and then it eventually goes into a song that everybody knows by Lou Reed called Sweet Jane. And I'm talking about the live version of Sweet Jane that's on Rock and Roll Animal. If you are listening right now and you're going, "I hate Lou Reed," listen to Rock and Roll Animal and the other album that came out called Lou Reed Live. They were recorded the same concert. And so they basically released Rock and Roll Animal. It has half of the songs that they were played that night, and Lou Reed Live has the rest of them. Amazing. And the reason that it's amazing is, it's Lou Reed playing a song that he did when he was in the Velvet Underground, but what makes it cool is it has two guitarists on it by the name of Dick Wagner and Steve Hunter. And we've actually talked about Dick Wagner before. I think on our first acid rock, proto-metal acid rock episode, which was episode 3. We talked about Dick Wagner, his band called Ursa Major, I believe was their name. They only released one album. We played that, and we talked about how he went on to play with Alice Cooper and some other groups. Well, Lou Reed picked them up after Lou Reed records his first album after he leaves Velvet Underground, and he hires as his guitarist Steve Howe from Yes, and his keyboardist is Rick Wakeman from Yes.
That's some quality backup guys.
Yeah, so the first Lou Reed album, which nobody's ever heard, has those two guys on it. That's pretty awesome, but it doesn't sell for anything. And so by the time he gets around to his second album, he's met David Bowie, and Lou Reed becomes kind of this glamified icon that he wasn't before. And so he's working with Bowie, and he's recording these kind of amazing songs that Bowie and Mick Ronson help him write. And when it comes time for his third album, he wants to step up the production because Bowie and Ronson did the second album. He wants to step up production, so he goes with Bob Ezrin. And we've talked about Bob Ezrin. We know he did The Wall. Yep. He did Kiss Destroyer. He did basically every great Alice Cooper album that ever came out. And he was it was around that same time that he's working with Lou Reed. And Bob Ezrin says to Lou Reed, if you're going to go do some live stuff before we do this album, I have some guitarists you might want to use. The guys that I bring in to do stuff for me. And it was Dick Wagner and Steve Hunter. And these two guys are both Detroit guys. They came out of that awesome Detroit sound in the early 70s, late 60s. Again, we talked about Wagner. Both of these guys, I don't know if everybody knows this, but they played the lead guitar. These two dudes played the lead guitar on Train Kept A-Rollin'. Aerosmith. Aerosmith did not play lead guitar. No Joe Perry, no Brad Whitford on that song.
What's the story behind that?
They didn't. The producer said they're not cutting it for that particular song. These guys happen to be in the studio. They're ringers.
Really?
Bring them in.
Were they just on drugs at that point? Or
that was second album for Aerosmith.
So they probably were.
So I guess he just assumed that, I'll just get somebody else. They also played, or I should say Wagner played on Kiss Destroyer. He played
Did he get credit?
No. These guys were ghost musicians.
They
right?
never get,
They ghosted. They didn't, they got paid a flat fee, and then nobody heard about this until years later, because at that time that wouldn't have gone over so well. For Alice Cooper, Dick Wagner and Steve Hunter played just a ton of, when it was the Alice Cooper band.
So they're a hired pair, not just hired guns, but
the funny thing is the first time I think they played together, they didn't know they played together, because when they went in to do the Aerosmith thing,
they just tracked
Steve Hunter. They tracked Steve Hunter. He happened to be there, and then some days later, Dick Wagner happened to be there, and they ended up using Steve Hunter's first and Dick Wagner's lead second.
God.
So
it's amazing.
Getting back to this, Lou Reed gets these guys from Bob Ezrin, and sure enough, they put together this amazing band that's just impressive. And there's no great opener, at least they didn't feel like there was a great opener for the show. And so Steve Hunter had something he had worked with in a previous band and says, why don't we do this before Sweet Jane? It'll flow right in Sweet Jane. It ends on the same chord. And that's what they did. Now, there's some controversy over whether what you're about to hear was actually recorded live or if they did the intro in the studio and piped in fake audience. Because basically it's like the band warming up, like the old days, like James Brown. They're out, they're warming up, and then Lou Reed steps out. Yeah. So there were some accounts that I read that said I was there that night. That song didn't happen. It was Lou Reed was on drugs and he was just barely getting by.
That makes more sense.
But whatever the story is, this song is awesome. So I'm going to play Sweet Jane like you've never heard before if you haven't heard this.
they come home from work, sitting there by the fire, radio does play a little classical music that kids the boy to the wooden soldier. You can hear Jack say, dancing. There's other people like us, we gotta work. There's even some evil mothers, they'll tell you that life is just made out of dirt, that women never really fake. Oh, the villains always blink their eyes, that children are the only ones who blush, and life is just a die. Anyone with a head on heart, they went around and break it. Anyone with a play a part, they went around and hit it. Free trade.
That intro is amazing. I mean, that whole version of that song. I think I've heard that one time when Lou Reed passed away. You know, radio stations do a tribute. I think that's the only time I've ever heard that.
You heard that version?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because I remember listening to it and it was live, and I'm like, wait, what is that? But I don't remember the intro at all. I don't know if they played the intro.
Maybe they just cut the intro and just went right to the...
But if they did, I wasn't appreciating it back then like I do now. But the tone of those guitars instantly reminded me of somebody we left off our list from the 70s.
Who's that?
Peter Frampton.
Yeah.
And that simple, slightly distorted, but clean. Those guys that could play that type of guitar lead, they aren't hiding behind feedback and distortion and delay to give them a fatter sound. It was
to help their sustain.
To help their sustain. Everything was the tips of their fingers. Just, you could hear every single note and every single bend. It was very clean, but just perfect. Those two guys have a chemistry together, and those, it wasn't necessarily harmonies. They were leading at the same time. So there's one thing about guitar harmonies that I love, but when two people can
overlapping leads.
Yeah, Skinner did that. Allman Brothers did that.
Tony Iommi did it, but he double tracked.
And Randy Rhoads, same thing. He would track a solo and then say, all right, rewind that, and instantly go back and play harmonies to his own solo.
Right.
So that type of thing. But just, two leads from two different people live at the same time. Yep. That's a skill.
And they're more than likely, they're just kind of jamming.
Yeah.
I bet it was different every night.
Probably so. They had a basic structure to it and jammed. And who was the band? Was it Cowboy Junkies that did the cover of that song in the 80s or 90s?
Probably 90s.
Yeah. And I prefer that version over Lou Reed's original version any day of the week. And I'm not against Lou Reed, but he's in the same category as Neil Young, where I respect the hell out of him, but I'd rather listen to covers of their songs than them actually playing it.
Yeah, I like Lou Reed, but I get where people don't like him. It's all about his delivery. He's just so New York, and his delivery is kind of who he is.
He's a poet and an artist. artist
a poet.
that happens to be in a band.
Exactly.
And so that's why I respect it. And I love the music, but personally, I love it delivered by other people.
Sort of like Bob Dylan.
Yeah, same thing. Okay, third person there. Yeah. So 3 people that I love their music and respect their songwriting and love their covers of their songs.
I totally get that, but I will say, if you've ever considered getting a Lou Reed album, get Rock and Roll Animal and Lou Reed Live.
If those guys are playing, I'll listen to it. Absolutely, no questions asked.
They do a version of Walk on the Wild Side without the orchestration and the stand-up bass with that band that just floors you. It's amazing what they do with the song. They could just interpret his stuff just with and it's funny because Lou Reed hated this period. He did not like. Did not like the fact
he hates
that these
the thing
guys
that made him famous.
Well, he didn't like that these guys were kind of overpowering what his delivery was, because Lou Reed played guitar too, but he was just a rhythm guy, minimalist, and it was all about his vocals and his delivery. And these guys kind of elevated him. It
was a show and it was entertaining, and he hated that.
But that's the period of Lou Reed I love. I love that glam period where he met David Bowie, and David Bowie trying to help mold him into something a little more risque, I would say, than what he is.
Just push him out of his comfort zone.
Yeah.
We all need that once in a while. I've had that happen to me, and it's a lot of fun.
So these guys would go on from here to work together. Couple years later, when Alice Cooper left the Alice Cooper band, he went solo. So when he did his first one, which was Welcome to My Nightmare, he brought these 2 guys in to be his guitarist, and they were his guitarist for a couple of years. And then Dick Wagner was actually his guitarist until the early 80s and helped write a lot of Alice Cooper material. But Steve Hunter came back a couple times to Alice Cooper as well, and I actually got a chance to see Steve Hunter in, I think it was 2011, 2013, somewhere around there. He was actually the 3rd guitarist with Cooper at his live band at the time.
Do you remember the show that you and I saw at Chastain? Do you remember who the guitar player was?
Yeah, that wasn't Steve Hunter. I've only seen him once.
Was it a younger guy?
That was a younger, I can't remember who it was.
Yeah. It wasn't the woman that is a shredder that she's amazing. We talked about her.
Yeah, we talked
a few episodes
ago. No, it was not her. She plays with them now. We also saw him with another woman shredder named Orianthi, who was amazing.
When was that?
I think
was it a festival?
I think the opening for Iron Maiden, maybe?
No.
Maybe that was me and Jeremy. I can't remember.
I think it was you and Jeremy, because I don't even remember an opening band at
there was one of the Maiden shows, and I believe it was Cooper open, and Orianthi was playing guitar for him, and she's amazing too.
Yeah, those are amazing guitar players too.
All right, well, let's go into something a little more modern. I'm just going to kind of jump all over the place.
All right.
And I'm going to talk about a guy that we've actually played this band before, but when we played them before, we were talking about prog rock. And this guy's all over the place. So the guy I'm talking about, his name is Joey Eppard. And his brother is Josh Eppard, who is the drummer in Coheed and Cambria, if you're familiar with that band.
Or Cambria, like we say here in the South.
Well, okay. I don't know how I say Cambria, but whatever.
Coheed and Cambria.
I don't know. I could be wrong.
Cambria.
One of the bands I love, I've probably seen almost 10 times. I love that band. Great new progressive band. Amazing. But Josh was originally in this band called 3 with Joey. And Joey, when he went to Coheed, Joey continued 3, and 3 has several albums, but they started in the early 90s, and they were experimental funk and prog. They kind of mixed the two together, very experimental. They got their start playing Woodstock, the Woodstock Festival, because they were from Woodstock, New York. And somehow they got onto the festival, this huge, which I think, didn't they call it Woodstock 2? It was the 94 festival. It was the one.
The first reproduction of it.
Yeah.
I think instead of the anniversary.
Yeah, I think it was Woodstock 2 or whatever. But anyway, they played there. They're young dudes when they played, and they got signed just by playing the festival. But their album didn't come out until several years later, and I think they had some issues with the company. And so anyway, they ended up going with independent to release their albums. But they released 8 albums. Some were on Metal Blade, some were on another label, 99 to 2011. And Eppard also has some solo albums, which are mostly acoustic. And to this day, he plays mostly acoustic. You can get his solo stuff on Bandcamp, and it's amazing. And you can watch him. He's done a lot of COVID shows. And it's,
like from his home? Or
he'll do it from a studio, and he actually charges, so it's not much.
Yeah.
And, you have to pay for it, and then you get to watch this amazing guy. And what makes it so amazing is his style is so unique, and it's kind of like a blend of really fast finger picking, almost like slapping, like a bassist would do, slapping the bass, but he slaps guitar. And then he also throws in this real fast flamenco, using all all his fingers.
Oh, that's where it comes from, yeah.
But it's just, he blends it all together, and he's got this amazing voice at the same time. So he's singing these very complex songs and doing this amazing stuff, mostly on acoustic now. But even in the 3 stuff where he's playing electric, he still usually has acoustic underneath it. So I'm going to play something from...
Oh, anybody that has a double guitar. I'm envious of that. I've always wanted a double guitar.
Yeah, so take a listen to 3. We've played them before. Like I said, we played them on episode 19, Rating the Progressive Rock Crypt. And I'm going to play it from a different album. This is from their album called The End Has Begun, which I believe was like a major release for them. Came out in 2007. I'm going to play the title track called The End Has Begun. This is 3 with Joey Eppard playing guitar.
I think that's the first time I've heard flamenco and metal merged
pretty damn cool.
Successfully, but at all, probably. But yeah, that's amazing. My thumb hurts just listening to that because I know.
And it's his own version of it. He's kind of like, if you hear some other stuff, he's really doing like slap bass techniques on a guitar. It's just crazy.
That's
what
thinking
he does.
Outside the box right there.
Exactly. I've heard a couple guys acoustically try to do some of that, but never with this speed and with the intricacy.
Well, I've heard heavy flamenco that's made to sound like right, but on electric combined with flamenco, that's a different one for me.
Yeah, very
like
unique. He doesn't just do this. So like I said, he has his solo stuff that's really more acoustic, where he does more interpretations of this kind of stuff. And then he has a side project, which I mentioned he started funk. He has a side project where he works with some of the guys that were in P-Funk and Bad Brains.
What?
Like a funk thing he does. And
we
to
need
hear
to
him
feature
play
that.
funk is...
How do we get that on our next funk episode? Wherever they are, we need to figure out where they are, and we'll go visit them in the pirate ship.
Yes.
We'll go to them.
I agree.
Unless they're in town, then they need to come over here.
All right, so moving on, we are going to talk about a guy that you may have heard of him as well. A lot of people have heard of this guy. There was a urban legend going on about this particular gentleman for a long time, and was how I was introduced to him. And we're going to talk about a guy named Phil Keaggy. You ever heard of Phil Keaggy?
No.
Okay, so...
I'm trying to think of urban legends.
He's a mostly Christian artist who people have cited in guitar magazines for decades that he's one of the world's best guitarists. He's been voted in all these polls as one of the best guitarists ever. And the urban legend comes in. So when I was in probably just graduating high school, and several of my buddies I was in band with were getting more into guitar and getting more into studying guitar and getting better. And this guy, Hal Luton, who I was in a band with, he got really good really fast. He played with his, I think, youth group or something as well. So he was, working with some folks at like a church. And I think that's how he heard about Phil Keaggy. But he would tell me, he's like, there's this guy, Phil Keaggy, he's the best finger-picking guitarist ever. His acoustic stuff's amazing, but he can also jam. And the word was that Jimi Hendrix went on The Tonight Show, and Johnny Carson asked him specifically, how's it feel to be the world's greatest guitar player? And Hendrix said, I don't know, you'll have to ask Phil Keaggy. This is the urban legend. Now, this has never been proven that this was said, and Phil Keaggy himself says, no, that was never said.
Was Jimi Hendrix ever on Johnny Carson?
So he was, and he was on Dick Cavett as well. So there's like two stories.
Well, no, I've seen the Dick Cavett several times. I've never seen...
Johnny Carson doesn't exist.
Okay, that's why.
He was on it, and the tapes didn't make it. So nobody has ever seen that footage.
Okay, that's the urban legend part
that's
of it.
where the urban legend comes in.
I've seen the Dick Cavett one a few times. That's interesting to watch him try to interview Hendrix. They're on two very different planes.
Yeah. So the story is, Hendrix did know about Phil Keaggy.
Yeah.
Whether or not he actually said that, Phil Keaggy says, no, that's just a legend that wasn't actually said.
But how cool is that, to have an urban legend that Hendrix was saying?
Well, and this has propelled him for years and years and years.
I'll take that any day of the week and run with it.
Yeah,
sure. He said that totally.
So this guy, Phil Keaggy, he was not a Christian artist. He was, as a teenager, he was in the 60s. He's been recording since the late 60s, and he was in a band called Glass Harp, and they recorded at Hendrix's Electric Lady studio. So he did know Hendrix, but that band, when he was 19, they were an acid rock band. They were, dropping LSD and playing crazy jams, and they were opening for the Kinks, Iron Butterfly, an early version of Yes, Grand Funk, Chicago. I mean, they were on the scene opening for these bands that we all know now, but for whatever reason, they just never quite made it, and he left. He was saved, and he was born again, and then he left in 1972 to focus on faith-based music. So he did the whole Christian rock thing before it was a thing.
Yeah.
And kind of helped invent it, I think.
In the 80s, it really, with bands like Petra.
Yeah, there were tons of bands that came out of the 70s and the 80s.
Stryper was you can go either way with that. But
right.
There was still a huge Christian rock.
Yeah,
rock
they were more
movement.
mainstream.
Yeah.
There were whole groups of bands, and I think there still are, that are only known in that Christian rock circuit. Like, they'd never cross over to...
play huge concerts. I mean, arena-sized concerts.
Yeah.
That just was a different genre all its own.
Yeah, but it's his own thing. And he's actually won 7... They have, like, these gospel music awards. He's won 7 Dove Awards. So this guy's very talented. He's had multiple Grammy nominations. Like I said, he's been talked about for decades in these guitar magazines, but I guarantee you most people... No,
never would have heard him.
I never heard him.
Yeah.
They may have read about him, but they probably never heard him because they go, oh, well, he plays Christian music. I'm not going to listen to that. Well, he put out in 2006 an album called Jammed, where he just plugged in and got some badass dudes together, and that's all they did. They just jammed, and they got on record. So I'm going to play something from that so that people can finally hear what this guy sounds like on electric guitar.
All right.
And yeah, it's just amazing. This is him later in life, but still amazing. And he's still playing today. I mean, he has over 50 albums.
Jeez.
Over 50 albums, plus additional 50 or 60 of collaborations he's done.
Yeah.
So he's just
working.
He's just worked since the 60s, and I think he's still going. But, he's even played with Paul McCartney. So he's jammed with everybody. So here's some Phil Keaggy. If you've heard of him, now you're going to hear him.
Amen, brother. Rock and roll will save your soul. That was kind of a, I don't know when that was, yeah, jalapeno. I don't know when that was recorded, but it kind of was like a 70s Joe Satriani. And obviously they're just...
It was recorded in 2006,
yeah,
but he's an older dude. He's been playing since the 60s. The sound
was not as 80s as a Satriani sound, so it had that classic sound to it, but God... just straight ahead good times rock and roll right there. And
you could tell probably all improvised.
Yeah.
Just jamming. I mean, the album's called Jam.
He's like, here's the tempo.
I think they just plugged in.
A minor, A sharp, and B, to the fifth.
Not super flash.
Removed.
Not super flash, but there were moments of things that you heard in there. It was like, wait a minute, how did he do that?
Bridge bend. Yeah. There's a couple of things I would like to go back and listen to a second time. Like, what was that? I'm sorry.
I call them spaghetti runs. It's like, wait a minute, where did that go? It's like real tasty and kind of, like you said, kind of 70s based blues guitar licks.
That was not an arpeggio that I'm familiar with. I'm sorry.
The man knows his instrument.
Yeah.
Let's just say that.
So that makes me think of another guitar player that is not on our list, I guarantee it, but his name is Doyle Dykes, and he's an acoustic player.
No, wait. That's a different Doyle.
Is that a Doyle? Oh, yeah. Doyle Dykes, acoustic guitarist, kind of a Chet Atkins style finger picker, but he tours around and plays almost exclusively in churches, and is all instrumental. He's not necessarily a Christian musician. That's just where he has a sweet spot of getting audiences in churches, and he shows up at Guitar Center and stores like guitar stores and does demonstrations. And so real low-key artist, but amazing talent. And I've got one of his CDs that it's just real chill finger picking, melodic, good time stuff. But in that realm of church music, there's all these bands that kind of are on the edge of it. There's hardcore Christian bands that that's on their sleeve, and then there's artists that are accepted into that world because once again they're instrumental, and so there's nothing wrong with that. And churches gladly let him have concerts, and they take up a collection at the end of the concert. That's how he gets paid. So he's not charging the church.
Right.
I mean, the church isn't paying him; they're just allowing him to play. And so he used to,
Brother Doyle.
Yeah, pre-COVID, he would come through Atlanta every other year, and my brother-in-law turned me on to him. So look him up. I'm sure there's something on YouTube out there. But Doyle Dykes, some really good finger picking acoustic music.
Very cool. Well, we're going to move on to an 80s guitarist. Speaking of 80s guitar and how that wasn't that, we're going to move on to one of these guys that somewhat forgotten. I think for a time he was like on those readers list, one of those top guitars that everybody loved, and then it just kind of went away with the 80s. So it's also a supergroup that I'm going to talk about that he's part of. There were a lot of these supergroups that came out there were two labels. One in the 80s was called Shrapnel Records. Shrapnel Records was known for, it was by Mike Varney was the guy that owned the label, and all of those guys like Marty Friedman, Jason Becker, Michael Lee Firkins, all these guys that were shredders. That was the Shred record label. That's where all that stuff came out of. But there was also Magna Carta. So Mike Varney had part ownership of Magna Carta, which was a progressive metal label. So still you have these just amazing players and all these bands that nobody's ever heard of. But in the 90s and 2000s, they were really looking at those, what we talked about, those tribute albums. So a lot of those tribute albums came out on that label as well. And they would also put together supergroups where they just throw four guys together that are from amazing bands that are just amazing virtuosos and say, record something on the spot. So you throw
1, 2, 3, 4, go for it.
Billy Sheehan and Mike Portnoy in the room together, and you just see what you're going to get. But one of these groups that I'm talking about that we're going to play from is Bozzio, Levin, and Stevens. And the Stevens is Steve Stevens.
Oh.
Everybody knows, or most people that were into 80s music remembers how big Steve Stevens was with Billy Idol. He was Billy Idol's right-hand guy.
He had some big hair.
He had big hair.
Videos, woo!
Yeah, he was, but everybody knew he was...
ripped, shredding guitars.
He was like the Eddie Van Halen for Billy Idol.
Yes.
And when Billy Idol's career sort of went a different direction or kind of faded a little bit, so did Steve Stevens. Where did Steve Stevens go? But what you don't know about Steve Stevens is he's a flamenco guitarist. He actually has flamenco albums that he's put out. Now, he can shred, and that's mainly what he does.
Well, did he also play for Janet Jackson?
I think he might have.
Dirty Diana.
Yeah,
There's a song I remember that was wicked for Janet Jackson, which didn't interest me in high school at all, but all of a sudden there's this guitar solo on her album.
Well, I don't know about Janet, but he did play with Michael Jackson for a while. He was Michael Jackson's guitarist.
I'll have to look that up.
He was Robert Palmer's guitarist for a while. When Vince Neil left Motley Crue, he was Vince Neil's guitarist. And he's also played with Sebastian Bach. I don't know what's wrong with him. Why is he playing with these singers that you can't get along with? But he did it. He also won a Grammy in '87. I didn't remember this, but the Top Gun anthem, the instrumental that goes throughout the entire movie, that's Steve Stevens. He won a Grammy for that.
I can hear it in my head. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah,
that's Steve Stevens. So
really, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he gets put together with these prog guys. So you got Terry Bozzio, who was Zappa's drummer. He and his wife had a new wave band called Missing Persons, if you remember them.
The name was familiar, and I was like, no, that's not the singer. Oh, it's the drummer.
The drummer.
And his wife was...
That was his wife.
Yeah.
He's played with Vi on some Vi albums, but he's a well-known, just amazing drummer on his own. And then Tony Levin is the bass playing. He also plays that instrument called the stick, which is like a bass that you two-finger
without
tap.
a body, yeah.
So he's played almost all of the Peter Gabriel stuff from the 80s and 90s, and also was in King Crimson. So
that's some serious credentials.
These guys have some chops.
Yeah.
And so they put together this album named after them, and it's called Blacklight Syndrome. It came out in 1997. And I'm going to play one of these songs that it's a little long, it's a little jammy, but that's what it's supposed to be. I think it'll just kind of blow your mind a little bit. Maybe you didn't realize that Steve Stevens sounded like this.
So for those of you listening at home, Kevin and I have this amazing archive and a staff, like 4 people full-time on standby to do research for us. So during that song, we sent them a quick memo to pull up some information. And yes, Steven Stevens, it was the guitar player for Janet Jackson and Michael Jackson. Not at the same time.
He's basically a Jackson.
Jackson. He's one of the Jacksons. He's like Jackson 7.
Steve Stevens Jackson is his full name.
Yeah, he was such a part of the family that Joe Jackson beat him, just like everybody else.
That's horrible.
Was that the dad name? Joe?
That was it, yeah.
Joe Jackson's also the piano player from he's stepping out.
We are stepping out. Bitch!
Get to work! Do it again!
I'm going to step on you.
Step on you. Oh, boy. So anyway, they came back with all that information and a photo of his Terry Bozzio's drum kit, and good googly moogly at the drum kit, how long that must take to set up. So your homework is to Google Terry Bozzio's drum kit, and then type in guitarist for Dirty Diana, and it'll pull up a picture of Steve Stevens. I can't say
Steve
Stevens.
There you go.
With his hair. Oh my God. There's nothing more 80s than his hair and his guitar playing back then, because I remember it standing out on the Janet Jackson song and the Billy Idol songs, and that there's no more quintessential 80s sound. I mean, the stuff he would get out of that guitar, it's so different. And even on that song we just played, that sound of the spaceship going up into the air. What the hell was that?
You never heard him sound like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was him.
Cool.
He's playing with...
he's mature now.
Well, he's playing with Tony Levin, so it's like he was getting his inner Robert Fripp, King Crimson kind of thing
just
going on.
grooving, laid back. The stuff he played with,
had little flamenco in the middle.
Edgy as fuck. Yeah. Edgy back in the 80s, and now, it's just, hey, man, everything's good.
Yes. He's just an impressive guitarist that I didn't know he could expand that far.
Yeah.
When I heard that, that blew me away. And that was a bit wonky, so, definitely a lot of wankery going on with that song, both on the drums, on the bass, on the guitar, but that was a thing, and I had a lot of that stuff, so I could have pulled from even longer songs, but I was trying to keep it at least 8 minutes.
At least,
it's a guitar episode. We're going to get a little wanky.
I'm a big fan of the 3.5 minute songs most of the time, but that was good.
Well, I'm going to bring you a palate cleanser here.
Okay.
So this is going to be a nice, short, brief song from an artist that you and I have seen live.
Ooh.
But I think a lot of people only know him in these live settings and maybe another band that he was in called Thin Lizzy.
Oh, yes.
And I am talking about Mr. Terrence Charles White.
Otherwise known as Snowy.
Snowy White. So he has played a lot with the fellas in Pink Floyd.
Did we see him 3 times?
3 times.
3 times we've seen him, yes. With Roger Waters.
With Roger Waters. Now, he's also played with David Gilmour. I didn't know this, but he actually was a touring guitarist during the Animals tour that Pink Floyd had in 1977. So he's a second guitarist then. And the original tour that they did for The Wall, he was the second guitarist there as well.
And there was a story of during the Animals tour that there was, and I can't remember, there was a malfunction or something towards the end of this set or the show. David Gilmour was not in a good mood, was unhappy about something, and walked off and walked to the back of the arena and actually watched the last song or two.
Watch Snowy White do it?
Yeah, and because he knew that he had all the parts down.
Right.
And I can't remember if it was a technical malfunction or a mental malfunction that he was just like, fuck it, I'm out of here. But he said he walked to the back of the arena and got to watch his own band play the last couple of songs in the show.
Well, I remember I gave you a bootleg Animals tour CD a long time ago.
Oh my God, where is that?
So I'm assuming that's Snowy White on that. I don't think I ever really realized that he was part of that tour.
I'd love to have another copy of that.
I don't even know. I ordered that at the time from some bootleg site. Who knows what happened to that disc?
Stuck in the CD player of my car.
Probably doesn't work anymore.
There's like 3 CDs that are stuck in the CD changer that, I don't know, I'll never get them out unless I get a blowtorch.
If you're looking for Snowy White on some Pink Floyd related releases, he's been in Roger Waters' touring band since 1990, which is why Robert and I've seen him so many times, and he's the one that steps up at the end when they do Comfortably Numb. He basically plays the David Gilmour part. Now, he does a great job. He's not David Gilmour, but he does a great job of it. So he's been on, remember the 1990 Wall live in Berlin?
I've got a piece of the Wall from that. I ordered
Did you? Well, that's Snowy
Who
White.
knows? It's a piece of a parking lot somewhere, but I'm going to just imagine that it's a piece of the Berlin Wall.
It's part of Roger Waters' driveway.
His driveway. He had
it off.
landscaping done. He's like, put this in a box. We can sell it.
He's on another Waters live recording called "In the Flesh," which I believe you also have that. And then they released a version of "The Wall" from the original tour they did in 1980, a few years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, and he's on that as well. So if you want to hear that stuff, that's Snowy White playing the second guitar in Pink Floyd, and he joined Thin Lizzy in 1980. So 80 to 82, after he did the tour for The Wall, he joined Thin Lizzy. And if you have ever listened to their albums Chinatown or Renegade, which was close to the end of their run as Thin Lizzy, but man, I love Chinatown. Such a good album. Just great music on that one. He is the guy. So he's one of the guys, I should say. Scott Gorham's on that as well. Thin Lizzy known for doing their harmony guitar parts, and he was part of that. He's mostly a traditional blues guitarist, so he has a lot of solo albums as well. Most of his solo albums are really blues standards, if you will, that he's interpreted or that he's written in that style. But his first couple albums that came out in the early 80s were rock pop of the time with a little blues fusion thrown in. So I'm going to play something from his very first solo album called White Flames. It came out in 1983. It had a hit in the UK, but here in the States, I never really knew that Snowy White was a solo artist.
No.
I just knew him from what we've talked about in Thin Lizzy and Pink Floyd connection. So kind of cool to hear this, and you get to hear him do a little bit of his guitar work that maybe in those other groups you didn't know exactly when it was him. This is all him. So check it out. This is called The Answer.
interesting. It had kind of a early Yes proggy feel to it.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah, really
Very
interesting. The keyboard wonkiness.
Very 80s.
Very 80s.
Super
Extremely-
early 80s.
Yeah.
Very different from anything you've heard him touch before.
Yeah, it wasn't the bluesy rock that I was expecting.
And he transitioned from, he has a couple albums like that, which were, to me, kind of fusion, jazz fusion mixed with rock and pop, and because it has a little bit of 80s pop sensibility to it.
But it was all
And that's
over
him
the map.
singing. That's
Oh, that
him
was?
singing. Yeah, that's Snowy.
I guess, yeah, he sang when he was on tour with Pink Floyd. I
He
just
sings
don't, I
backups.
don't remember that part.
Yeah, so bizarre, but
Yes.
cool.
He's had quite an interesting life.
And the lead in the middle is, you're hearing mostly keyboard in the middle lead in the break, but he's actually playing with it.
Yeah, he was
So-
right over the top of it.
Yeah, they're playing together. It's not harmony; they're playing the same notes. So
Yeah.
it's interesting doing a run together like that. But at the beginning, he's just ripping it. At the beginning of that song, love it. All
That was
right,
a good choice.
yeah, different, right? So here's something that's really obscure, and the reason that I own this cassette tape that I've ripped and put onto digital that we're going to listen to now is because in the early 90s, I went to college. I was a drummer in high school, played in a punk band with Brandon Steele called Frontman. We were amazing. And unfortunately, we couldn't continue because I had to go to college and I could not take my drum kit. And so I really started focusing on guitar, and I was going to take my guitar and I was going to form a new band when I got to college. And that's exactly what I did. In the summer between graduating high school and going to college, I thought I really got to get better because I was a chord popper, just playing chords and not really knowing how to do anything else. So I really immersed myself into prog and jazz and kind of that instrumental guitar thing that was happening around 1991. So your Steve Vais, your Satriani, and
Steve Ray Vaughan.
Stevie Ray
A lot of
Vaughan,
instrumental
all of
stuff from
that
him.
stuff. Yeah, so I was just trying to soak it all up, and of course I couldn't play anything like that.
Couldn't either.
but I was trying to get
Yeah,
inspiration.
I would play along rhythmically to those, but I couldn't
Yeah.
play the leads.
And I think you did the same thing I did. I thought, well, I'm going to start reading the Guitar Player magazine and Guitar World, and that way it'll teach me
Learn how to play
something.
tablature.
Yeah, no, I'll get to learn some stuff. And Guitar World used to have this section where they would feature, it was like a one page where they would feature local, regional artists that you need to know about or something. I forget what it was called, but it was in every episode.
Up and coming.
In every issue. Yeah, up and coming artists or something like that. And I read a blurb because I was really getting into progressive music. And I remember I was just getting into a band called Gentle Giant at the time, which nobody's ever heard of. But I was really getting into
Well,
them.
I've heard of it because of you.
Right.
That's the only reason.
Right. And there was a little blurb about this guy that said he has odd meter in his contemporary recordings that reminds one of Gentle Giant. I thought, oh, I got to get that.
I know who that is.
I knew who that is.
I know who that is.
And it had an address, and it said send $6 or whatever it was. And
To P.O. Box 4326.
so I wrote this gentleman a nice note and telling him how much I was getting into this kind of music, and can't believe that I've stumbled upon somebody
so
who's
old school.
I know. I can't believe that there's somebody who actually plays this kind of stuff. I thought I was the only one in the world that knew about them. Of course, I didn't know that they were big in the 70s, but anyway, this is 1991.
Currently the only one in the world that knows about that.
And I'm 18 years old. What do I know about anything?
Dear sir,
Yeah.
I would like to subscribe to your newsletter.
So about 6 weeks later, I get in the mail a package, and it has a cassette tape in it. And I pull the cassette tape out, and it's a 6-track EP. And it had a handwritten note from this guy named Rick Miles. And he wrote me this really nice note saying, yeah, he never alluded to the fact that he agreed with their assessment of what his music sounds like. But I did find out later that he wasn't a prog metal band later. So I guess he was kind of proggy. But when I popped it in, I was
Nobody wants to
expecting...
admit that. Yeah, even the musicians themselves don't want to admit that they're into prog music.
I was expecting something like Gentle Giant when I popped into my cassette deck.
Yeah.
And what I got was something that was more similar to what I was listening to, like the Satriani and the Vai.
Yeah.
It was a very Steve Vai vibe to him. But this guy, Rick Miles, he's from Pittsburgh. He got these, I think he got a write-up in all the magazines at the time.
What was his name?
Rick Miles.
Miles.
Mals.
Mouse. Okay.
Mouse. And he was, I did a little research on him. He was a Berkeley grad, one of those guys that were just amazing
that's one of those
virtuoso
smart
dudes.
people.
One of those smart people with music, and he was a teacher for a long time. He also played drums and bass. And where he went from when I got his tape in 1992, later he would be a bass player and a drummer in a prog metal band from 99 to, I think, maybe 10 years, till 2009. He was in this band called Visual Cliff, who I haven't heard. I'm going to go check him out, though, just to see what it sounds like. But he wasn't the guitarist. But this tape that I got, he had all these notes on the inside of the tapes. So it was a cassette with a fold out one color, back in the day, because you had to save money. That color ink was expensive. So you went with black and white. And he had a little drawing of a guy making a grunting face or something on the inside. And it said, there are no real drums on this album. So it's all programmed drums from 1991, which you know what that sounds like. And you'll get to hear it. Yeah, it's very interesting. But it's funny that he would go on to be a drummer in a prog metal band after this. Interesting. This, I think, is his only solo album that has ever come out. He re-released it. So I got it. The cassette I have has 6 songs, and it came out in 1992. He re-released it on CD in 2004 with 8 songs. So he added some stuff to it. And then that's it. That's all I found on Discogs, other than this other band he was in called Visual Cliff. So kind of cool, but this tape traveled with me to college.
Anybody in Pittsburgh knows of this guy?
I'm sure people do, but like I said, this tape has traveled with me all these years, and when I put it in and digitized it, it just brought back all those memories of this is just really different and cool, and yet kind of in that same Steve Vai Satriani line. So check it out, Rick Miles.
All right.
Rhythm Museum is the name of the cassette I had, and this song is called Miracle Storm.
Jeebus effing Crisco. Those guys are just on a different plane than the rest of us. I don't even know where to begin as far as
I was
thinking about
dancing.
playing that.
Were you dancing?
Right.
That beat was just solid.
If they had asked me to play tambourine with that band, I would be lost within 30 seconds. Trying to keep the beat and the rhythm to that. It's such a
It's a
different
one-man band. It's all Rick.
Well, I mean them, all the musicians, but yeah, one guy. No, was that recorded again?
1992.
92. Okay, I thought 91 was the other thing you said. That still sounded very 80s, even though that was 92.
It sounded a lot like Passion and Warfare, which was Steve Vai's album that came out in 1990.
But that type of show-off music, and I don't mean that disparagingly, because if I could show off like that, you bet damn well I would show off like that. But it's just those bands that are so good that it's complicated. It's all over the map, time signature-wise, and chord progressions, things like that. It's just amazing that there's people that kind of brain power.
It's musical geometry.
It really is.
What it felt like. There's all sorts of angles and things.
There's algorithms within music that I don't think of algorithms. I think of Facebook. But
how do you put something together like that? I don't think that.
Who's the poor bastard has to write out the music?
Well, it's a good thing it was one guy.
Poor guy.
It came out of his head.
Like just note for note, like tablature for that. Your head would explode.
So I thought after that easy dance song, we're going to end tonight with something you can actually groove to.
Okay,
This is just a groove here.
That hurt my brain. It was so good.
We're going to bring it back down.
Right.
You know where we like to sit. We like to sit in a little funk zone every once in a while.
Yes, we do. Amen, brother.
And let's talk about funk guitarist. I mean, when you think about funk bands and guitars, you think of that rhythmic kind of thing. You don't really think about shred. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, you think about wah-wah and that kind of rhythmic holding the groove down thing. Other than P-Funk, you don't really think of ripping guitars. Maybe, so you got Eddie Hazel, P-Funk. People know him. He Funkadelic. You might think of Prince. You know, Prince was pop, but Prince was funk.
He had some
and the man could play.
Massive funk sensibility.
The man could play. Curtis Mayfield. You might think of his guitar work. Ernie Isley Brothers. Nile Rodgers, Chic. None of those guys, other than Eddie Hazel and Prince, were real like ripping guitar, where it would almost be like, that's rock. Yeah. That's not even funk. That's rock. You were throwing rock guitar on top of a funk band. But I found another one. And the way that I found this one, we've already talked about them. In August, Jimmy Hazel from 24/7 Spies posted something about a band called Slave. And we played one of their songs back in episode 40.
12.
It was 40. And it was Rise of the Funky Junkies. And we played a Slave song from 1977 from their first album. And I'd never heard this band. I have since gone out and done exactly what Jimmy told me to do, which was just go ahead and get their first 7 albums. And that's what I did.
7.
Just go ahead and get all 7. You're going to love it.
Jimmy, I hope you have stock in that.
And sure enough, this is a band from Ohio from the 1970s. They went into the 80s, 15 albums from 77 to 95, but the 70s and early 80s was really that was their time. And they walked the line between funk, soul, and funk rock 70s style. And they have 2 guitarists on the first 4 albums. One goes by the name of Drac. His name's Mark Hicks, but he goes by Drac. And the other one's...
That sounds better than Mark Hicks. That's not funky.
And the other guy's Danny Webster. So these 2 guys, they were just a force on the first 4 albums. I mean, just amazing. 77 to 79, this band was just in the zone. And their second album, so this is a funk band that has like syrupy, soulful ballads to really groove and funk of the 70s that's just in the pocket, really good. And then they end their second album with a 6-minute guitar, just a
free-for-all
jam with these 2 guys just ripping over something you can dance to. So I'm going to play that song. It's called Volcano Rupture from Hardness of the World, 1977. Here's Slave.
amazing.
Right.
Amazing. So normally in a funk song, the bass is front and center. It's laying down the groove. It's heavy. It's funky. And I loved how it kind of laid back a little bit, had a good groove. It's in the pocket. Dun, 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 dun. And it just let the guitars come out front and center. And they slowly emerged and they played one and then the other one. And then they both were playing. And it was getting kind of crazy. And then the bass came in and just went boom. And the guitar stopped. And it was almost like, that's enough. All right, knock it off. And it got back into let's get back into the groove now. And it just went back to the, traditional funk groove.
They were painting the picture. It's called Volcano Rupture. And that's
So
exactly how the song
it just build,
goes.
build,
It
and then
builds.
boom.
It goes almost a minute and a half just laying down the groove.
Just woo.
No
Boom, boom,
added
boom,
things, just laying down the groove.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, the Van Halen Eruption was recorded, 78?
78.
78. So this predates the
This is
Volcano
Rupture.
Volcano Rupture came before Eruption.
Yes.
All right. But yeah,
Interesting.
that's so good. That is so good. It's delicious.
And those guys can play.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I mean, it was dissonant, yet at the same time it fit.
It's melodic.
Yeah, but it was like the notes were just fighting enough the groove, yet it still all worked. And it goes along again. They said, we're going to make a song called Volcano Rupture, and we're going to make you feel a volcano rupture. This is the music that
liquid
goes
hot
along
magma.
with what's happening.
Building and then exploding.
I'd
stop.
Yeah. Thank you, Jimmy, for introducing me to
Yes,
a band
thank you,
that
Jimmy.
was around that I never knew of.
When do we get to buy him a beer?
Well, hopefully 24/7 will start touring next year, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe late this year. If they do,
We will
Jimmy,
be there.
We owe you a
Come
beer.
through Atlanta.
Yep, absolutely. So that is what I have for you. Different guitar episode,
yeah.
maybe than what you thought it was going to
No. That's what I needed.
be. Okay.
Not what I expect. It's what I need. You know what I need.
Yeah, there was no typical Satriani
Because
vibe.
I can
blues.
hear that
It's all over the
anytime.
place.
Yeah. I heard all of that. Although I would like to hear Satriani's Always With You, Always With Me. I haven't heard that in a long time. I was thinking about that when you were talking about him.
It's good
That's
stuff.
his real slow ballad.
Yeah.
Love that song. Speaking about cassette tapes, did you have a chance to listen to the cassette tape that I gave you last week?
I have digitized it. I just haven't put the song titles on it yet to give it back to you.
I don't even know the song titles, half of them.
Well, I'm going to have to make them up then.
Okay, so I was going through a box and found 2 or 3 blank or non-labeled cassettes, and I didn't know what they were, and I had to borrow a boom box from my friend because I don't have anything to play a cassette on, and borrowed the boom box, and lo and behold, one of the tapes were the very first songs that I ever wrote and recorded. It was just a rough scratch recording to get them
It's a
on
demo.
tape. Demo,
Low quality,
yeah, basically
yeah.
demo quality, but they were the first songs that I ever wrote, and that was the cassette tape that probably predates Kevin and I meeting by just a couple of months. And so I handed that cassette to you at some point, or played it for you, and
I recognized all but maybe two of the songs.
Yeah, there were a couple of oddball, well, they're all odd, but especially oddball ones that we eventually worked a lot of those or some of those into Mercy Beat Big Jack Pneumatic, which was our band. So it was kind of cool to really go way back in the nostalgia machine and hear songs that I've not heard in 20 years. And they're my songs. And I forgot they existed completely until I heard them on that cassette. And that was fascinating and cringeworthy at the same time.
Yeah, from my recollection, I don't remember you ever saying, "Oh, I have these songs," and giving me a tape.
Yeah, I
don't ever remember
I might have just
hearing
played them, or
I think you just played.
Yeah,
for
I think
me.
you just played, but that was the start. That's where it all. You can trace it right back to that
Yep.
recording.
That is how we met, and that's how we bonded was
Yep.
over those songs that you were
Exactly.
writing at that time. So yeah, very cool.
Long time.
All right, man. Well, let's do this again next week. What do
Let's
you say?
do it. I'm here.
Okay. Well, let's hear a little bit of your guitar right now. Later.